Hey, hey, welcome to the Breakthrough series. I am so excited to have the Melissa Costello on the podcast. You probably recognize on the podcast. Okay, this is kind of a podcast.
Freudian flip.
In the future, it's coming. But I'm so excited to have her in the hot seat today. We actually met and she interviewed me last time.
Yep.
She's so amazing. I'm actually excited to hear some of the questions I'm going to ask you and some of the answers. But she has done so many incredible things in her life. I'm not going to list all of them, but right now she is doing a complete rebrand and really getting women to reclaim their wild. What? I want you just to start. I love people's stories. I love hearing all of the things. So take us through the roller coaster, what that looks like, because we all know it's a roller coaster. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And I love our connection. So I'm glad that we're continuing to build our relationship. And anyway, my story, I'll keep it as, condensed as possible, get all the good points in. But I think for me, a lot of it started obviously as a child, but where I really started to struggle was just being raised in an alcoholic home. My father was an alcoholic and he was very abusive and a rageaholic. And there was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear. And so kind of what that led to was me looking for a place to find safety, which ultimately ended up being food. So food was like the place that I went to get comfort and safety. And then when I started to get a little bit older, like close to my teen years, that's when I started to have like the body stuff come up because that, the food and the body stuff is usually always tied together.
Oh yeah.
And when my body started to change, that's when I really just started thinking to myself and believing that my body was my value, even at such a young age, because I grew up in the 80s. Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition was like the annual event of the year. And I had brothers who were always looking at women and perfect bodies and just all this stuff that I'm taking this information in as a young girl and making up decisions about myself. Oh, if my body looks like that, then I'll get attention. I'll be loved. I'll have a great life. I'll be happy. Right.
Oh yeah. The attachment there.
Yeah, totally. And so that kind of started my journey with my years and years of yo-yo dieting, feeling totally not at home in my body, just hating my body, punishing it, over exercising, just doing all the things that we do to our bodies. But the worst was what was going on in between my ears, right? My belief system and the things that I thought about myself. And I didn't have anyone in my life to really reflect otherwise. There was no one there to say gosh, that's not true. What's going on? No one there to support me. And, my mother, I think she was in survival mode and she was someone who, although she had a beautiful body, she didn't like her body. And so a lot of that was modeled to me as well. Cause I think what we learned from our parents, it's their word is gold, right? Even though we don't know that at the time, we're kids and we just want love from them. And so whatever they say or do, we believe, we take that oh, that must be true.
Yep.
So that just kind of all led to just a 30-year struggle with yo-yo dieting, emotional eating, stress eating, all of that. And luckily I was someone who really valued health and I grew up as an athlete. And although I had such huge body dysmorphia, I was always someone into exercising and health. And I got really into healthy eating. And when I moved across the country in my 20s to California from New Jersey, my whole world opened up in terms of the food world, right? And just learning a whole different way of eating and being with food. And I became a vegan and I started cooking a ton and just really getting so into eating healthy, And again, though, that was one of the ways that I was trying to control what I did with food and how I made my body look. Oh, I'll be vegan. That'll be the next answer. Even though I was always naturally attracted to, I never liked eating meat as a kid. I was forced to eat it, but I never liked it. And I gave up eating meat when I was 19. I gave up eating pork when I was 16. So it was this natural progression into veganism. And I still don't eat meat and I still don't eat dairy and all that stuff. And it just feels right for me. I'm not saying it's right for everyone, but it felt good for me.
Yep.
And so, so over the course of that time and becoming I love to cook, and I was like in and out of different jobs. I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't work for someone else. And I had done like every job in the world, And one of my closest friends is like, God, I feel like you've had 9 lives. You've worked so many different jobs and lived so many different, ways of living. And so it wasn't until I started working with a business coach, and I was like, I want to create something. Like, I'm tired of working for other people. Mm-hmm. And we were just brainstorming. She's like, well, you love to cook. And she's like, why not private chef? Like, be a private chef. Like, you've worked in restaurant industry forever. Your friends love your food. They rave about it. You love to cook vegan. And so that's how I started my business. Like, I just started it out, and who was my first client? Tony Horton of P90X. Like, we had mutual friends in common. We were introduced. We were both living in LA at the time, and we just became fast friends. And he eventually hired me to cook for him and work with him. And that eventually led me to getting my certification in nutrition and really learning more in that realm so that I could travel with him and teach and do all that. But in the meantime, I still am having all these like internal battles with my emotional eating and my body. And nobody really knew this was going on. Only like my closest friends. Like, I hid it.
Yep.
Tony had no idea.
That's crazy.
And at that time, I was working with him. I was about 30 pounds heavier than I am now, maybe like 25. Mm-hmm. For me, I was the heaviest I had ever been. I had never been as heavy as I was. And I was really in like a dark place with how I felt about myself and my body. And even though I had this like incredible job and I was working with this incredible guy and learning so much, I was really struggling internally. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until one night I had a binge. It was pretty bad. And I woke up just like devastated the next day and just thought to myself, like, I can't live this way anymore. Like, I don't want this for myself. And I called a friend of mine, and I was crying and just telling her what was going on. And she just said to me, like, I love you. And, like, this has been going on for a while. Mm-hmm. Right now you're being really self-centered. Like, this is so self-centered, like all of this body and food stuff. And she's like, I want you to get your ass up off the couch, go outside and be of service.
That's a friend.
Even if it's talking to someone on the street that you don't know, go be of service, make someone's day. And then I want you to get help. Like, I want you to hire someone and get help. Mm-hmm. And that tough love, I always need a good dose of tough love. Mm-hmm. And that changed my world. And that was like the turning point for me to invest in myself, to get coaching support. I also invested in a 2-year master program in spiritual psychology, which changed my world, helped me heal so much of the stuff I was dealing with. Mm-hmm. And I had to like really go inward and stop looking for those quick fix answers outside of me, which was meal plans, diets, like all the stuff we do, Mm-hmm. Yep. And so like, and through that process, I was still growing my business, but my business, as I was growing, my business was growing and transforming. And that's why I eventually moved away from nutrition into more working with people around emotional eating, stress eating, like all the things that I was going through. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's been a journey. And now my next phase is moving into this Reclaim Your Wild, which is really, really helping women step into their deeper truth so that they can live their most inspired and fulfilled life, right? Like, mm-hmm. I feel like so many women who struggle with their body, struggle with food, struggle with just being busy, stressed, overwhelmed. Like, we forget who we are, and we forget our dreams. And so that's what Reclaim Your Wild is about. It's about self-discovery. Mm-hmm. It's about reclaiming your voice, reclaiming that kind of deeper part of you that you just like, oh, I'll just put my kids first. I'll put my job first. I'll put everyone else first and like forget about me. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the next phase of my business that I'm really opening up to now and transforming into. At my Facebook group, it's been so much fun. And anyway, so that's kind of how I got to where I am now, the kind of shortened version.
And it's so fun when we're like, we have to give you the shorter version or we're going to be here forever.
Right? If you think about 30 years of, right, this struggle in and out of like dieting and diet culture and emotional, it's like, there's a lot of layers in there.
Yeah. Well, and I think that can be such a big why to help other women be like, let me just come here. Let me give you some TLC because I can shorten what I had to go through and give you your life back, essentially. in my view, what you're doing for women with Reclaim Your Wild is giving them freedom and letting them live in that freedom, not chained down, not, as we talked about in our interview with A Horse Gone Free.
Yes.
This comes up a lot. So I want, if you're willing to do this, to dive in deep to what your last binge actually looked like right before you had your breakthrough to go get help. Because people confuse, oh, I'm an emotional eater. No, this is not an emotional eating situation. This is like next level. So explain yours, because I never realized we had this. We have a very similar, right before our breakthrough was the ultimate, oh crap. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, I was a huge emotional eater. So what a binge looked like for me literally was like, it would happen all day long. Right. So I'd be, at the time I was living alone. I was in, when I moved to Santa Barbara, this was probably about 8 or 9 years ago. I had moved to Santa Barbara. I was living alone. I was in a new town, and I just was like away from all my friends, feeling like really lonely. And I had like a whole weekend day to myself. And I literally all day long, like back and forth to the kitchen, just looking for the next thing to like fill me up. Right. Like I'm a healthy eater. But it doesn't matter if you're binging, it doesn't matter how healthy the food is. It's not good for you on all levels. Right. Because it messes with, there's so much shame, like you talked about. It messes with your emotional and mental well-being. And then the physical part of it, like just how disgusting I felt, So it was like, well, oh wait, I'll have cookies. Okay, well, I can only have 3 cookies because then this. Oh wait, now I'm gonna have a big, huge bowl of popcorn. Oh, now I'm gonna go back and have, well, since I had popcorn, now I'm gonna eat something, I'm gonna have a salad. And now I'm gonna eat. So it was like this constant all day long binge of just like never feeling satisfied, but also at the same time feeling so like disgusted with myself and so gross, but I couldn't stop. I felt out of control, and like literally I was just like, oh God, I'm so fat. I feel disgusting. I'm so good. Like, just all the stuff that comes along with that. And I like literally went to bed just feeling like food up to here, burping, all the stuff that goes along with it. Feeling so gross about just myself and where I was. And I woke up that next morning crying, and I slept really bad, and I was crying, and I was on the couch, and I was like, I need to call someone because I'm at such a loss right now. And I'm like at such a low point that if I don't call someone, like this cycle is just going to continue, And I knew at that point I had to do something. And I was so glad that my friend gave me that dose of tough love that I needed, because it put me into action. And it made me invest in myself in a way that I never had before. And it changed my life. Like it really led me to that freedom and that liberation that we're talking about, and it kind of like, as I'm talking about, I'm getting knots in my stomach because thinking about the way it felt. Oh my God, I'm so glad I'm not there, but I can very much remember how it felt. And the devastation, like the internal devastation of living in that space for years, and all the time I lost, all the years I lost, all the time I lost, all the time I wasted, hating myself, hating my body, all of that.
So how many years do you think now you would say you've been healed from that? Since you said you struggled for 30 years, how long of a journey now has it been?
It's been close to probably about almost 10 years.
That's mine too. That's mine too. Look, we're like besties.
I'm 52. So I started struggling when I was like 11 years old. So it was, 30 years, well into my 40s.
So how did you hide things? Like does Tony know now that you struggle?
He does now.
Was he surprised when you actually opened up and shared? Was he like, why didn't you tell me?
I think at that time he wouldn't have been available to hear what I needed, because Tony was very much in the mindset of like, you just eat right. Like, what's the problem? Right. He was also, and he's changed a lot because of me and the education that I've given him around this. But he was very much in the Beachbody diet culture mindset. right? And he's no longer with Beachbody, and he now is working in such a different realm with mindfulness and really supporting more of the emotional side, because he's had his own health challenges in the last handful of years. But like him and I did an event probably like 4 years ago, and I went to him and I said, listen, I'm working with food and with people in a different way. It's not about meal plans anymore. It's not about nutrition. It's about what's underneath, what's driving. Because he would see it all the time. People would be like, I lost all this weight, then I put it all back on, then I lost it all, then I put it back on. Like he would see it all the time. He's like, I don't get it. Like, why can't they just eat right? Why can't they just follow a meal plan? And I said, Tony, it goes so much deeper than that. And most people don't know that, right? Like we live in such a culture that's like all about good, bad, right, wrong with food. It's very black and white. But we are complex humans and complex individuals. And there's so much that happens internally when it comes to food and eating, you know, and it's really never about the food. It's always about something else. And so I had to really open his eyes to this. And he was like, oh my God, I never even just thought about, because also he's a man, and men don't, some men have these struggles, but a lot of men don't. They're very good at like compartmentalizing and just doing what they need to do, you know? And if they go on a diet, they lose 10 pounds like that, you know? So it's like it's a different kind of approach.
Even though like, cause men definitely struggle, but it's different with women. We open up a little bit more about it. It's vocalized more. So I think in some realms, like there's even more shame for men because they shouldn't be struggling with that. That's another story. But with women, when you have people, not just him, but in general, that don't believe that there can be some kind of struggle with it, it keeps you quiet because you're like, something must be wrong with me. Because with the other people, they don't struggle like I do. They don't have to count everything. They don't have to eat in private. They don't go through these cycles. And I truly believe that when we keep talking like that, it keeps people in the dark. There's so many people that are struggling, especially now, you know, with everything going on in the world, that it's become this shame thing, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse until you get to that moment of your breakthrough. So I want to hear, I know that you've been able to live like all over the place, done some fun and crazy things. I was just having a conversation today about this, because this is part of the wild piece, I feel like, in a way. What are some of the crazy adventures, things that you got to be a part of, things that you were questioning, who am I to be here? I think that's a big like imposter syndrome, where you're around various people or you're in different settings. Just fun things that you really learned and grew from that really helped through your breakthrough, if it was 10 years ago.
God, I love this question. But, you know, for me, I'm not really an adventurous person. I'm just not.
I picture you being adventurous.
I'm not adventurous. I would say that I'm adventurous in a different way. Okay. So like a lot of people, when I think about adventure, I think about people who like climb Mount Everest and like go do these really, really scary things, like on a physical level. For me, I'm adventurous emotionally and mentally. So like for me, moving across country to a place from New Jersey to California where I didn't know a soul, and I landed in San Diego because I heard about it, right? And I heard there were dolphins that you could see in the ocean swimming. And I was like, that's where I want to go, right? Because it's California and there's palm trees, and like I didn't know a soul. And I landed in San Diego and I was like, holy shit, what did I just do? Right? I just left my home. I drove across country with my dog and my best friend, and I'm here and I don't know a person, you know? That to me was like one of the biggest growing lessons in my life, because it completely opened my world up from like this to like huge, right? Because I grew up in New Jersey, where it's very like narrow-minded. Not many people are into personal growth. It's very like a certain kind of mindset, you know, it's all about hard work, and, you know, that's what you do. And there's not a lot of room for growth, you know. And I felt I'm definitely like the white sheep of my family. I don't like that term black sheep, but I'm definitely different from my family because I'm the only one that got out, you know? And so for me, that was hugely adventurous. That was a big growth thing. And then also meeting Tony, working with Tony, traveling around the world with him, doing his camps, speaking at his camps, like that whole experience. Like for me, adventure is about meeting new people and the way I connect with them. Like to me, that's what adventure is about. It's not about like doing these big drastic feats of things, but also it's where I can really create and connect community. And I've had a lot of experiences of that in my life.
Mm-hmm.
At USM, University of Santa Monica, where I did my master's in spiritual psychology, was one of them. And then also I got the opportunity to work at a retreat center in the Bahamas where you swim with wild dolphins every day.
Ooh.
And I lived there for a while, and I've been there about 10 times now. And it is one of the places I feel most at home. And to me, that's like the biggest adventure, is to like find the place that where you feel most alive, most at home, and most connected. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's there. Like, that's that place. And I'm going back next year. I went for my 50th birthday. I took my girlfriends. Like, I'd never shared it with anyone. I'd never gone with anybody I knew except one of my best friends. And so I went with 5 of my girlfriends for my 50th, and like, we just had the most incredible time. Like, it was just like, now everybody gets it. Like, everybody knows what I've been talking about. So that for me, like, those are the adventures. It's more about the connections I create and meeting people and being open to that. Because I think being vulnerable and open is the biggest adventure you can put yourself on in the world. Mm-hmm. That's what I really believe.
Well, I love people's stories like that, because so many people, and I'm not putting these people down. If you are there, just bear with me for a second. So many people think that life is lived A to B to C. We're taught that in school, yep. You go from here to here to here. Well, what happens if you disrupt that and you move across the world? I did right. Too.
Yes.
And as you were saying it, I'm like, again, another thing that's connecting us. You were stripped away from anything and everything that you were connected to. You were a stranger to people. You start fresh. You got to be wild.
Yes.
We thought about that before, but you got to, your identity wasn't wrapped up in your past. If people knew your parents, I don't know if you have a relationship with them now or if you ever mended that, but you weren't connected to that. You weren't connected to your family. You weren't connected to partners. You weren't connected to your eating struggles if you didn't take them with you. You know, like, you weren't connected to the things that possibly grew there. And you were able to be free. And that in and of itself can be scary, because it's like you don't have your grounding, but you're so confident in your ability to figure it out. I don't know if you felt that or not too. It's like, I'm going to get new roots. I'm going to get new roots. I might be struggling a little bit. This is like, you know, I'll meet people. I'll figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, I vacillated between both, because when I moved, I knew in my heart that it was the next right step for me. But it took me about 2 years to finally feel like I've arrived, because wherever you go, there you are. You bring your shit with you, regardless if nobody knows. Right. So like, I still brought all my shit with me. I was just in a different environment. So I still had my eating stuff, my body stuff, but I also got to open up in a new way to new relationships and new people that I had never experienced before. And I built like the deepest relationships I had ever built with people, and deepened in friendships in a way that, and like a lot of the friendships fell away that weren't deep, you know what I mean? And so like, I got to really discover myself in a different way. And I was introduced to yoga, and like, just getting in that realm also opened up my world, you know, and becoming a yoga teacher and just like doing all those things that were adventurous on some level, because I'm putting myself in these unknown situations that are brand new, but like, I'm willing, I'm like, I want to bring it, soak it all up. I want to learn. Like, I'm always someone who wants to learn and grow, because I feel like if I stop growing, I stay stagnant. Like, then life is just like a flat line, you know? And so like, growing is adventure, right? Like, always going, like, finding the next thing that's going to up level for me. You know, like, now I'm really interested in, so I'm an empath, and I'm highly sensitive. And so like, I'm getting more into that realm of like what that means and how I can bring that to the world to support people who are highly sensitive, you know? And so like, I always go through different layers of things. You know, when I was in my 30s, I would do moon circles and goddess circles and like hold all this stuff for people that at that time it was like unknown. That was 20 years ago, you know? So yeah, I feel like I'm always kind of reinventing myself and rediscovering parts of myself, and it kind of ebbs and flows. But that to me is like true adventure, right? Because we're not living from A to B to C. We're kind of like, okay, what, you know, and being an entrepreneur, is one of the biggest adventures, right?
Shine a light on all of your self-sabotage,
Oh
like
my God.
every little bit. Yep.
Yeah. Well, my coach always says, like, you know, people who become coaches do it because, like, they know on some level they have to continue growing, right? And that they have their own stuff to work through. And so we want to help because we need help too, right? So it's like you always teach what you need to learn, kind of thing, you know? So that's been a huge adventure too. And like, as my business transforms, I'm always like, oh God, okay, this is like another new phase. Okay, got to like gear up for this. And what's that going to look like? And then I got to work through all my, you know, my limiting beliefs and things that come up, and sabotage and just all that upper limit stuff, you know? And so it's always an adventure.
It becomes that, like, okay, here we are. This feeling, I hate this feeling, but I know I'm about ready to up level. Why do I have this feeling of not worthy, or, you know, that I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I don't know enough yet for this? It's like, all right, let's jump in. It becomes that. Yeah. So how, because I love relationship stuff too. How much, because this is huge, how much did the food struggles, the body struggles, just the shame behind all of that impact romantic relationships? Were you able to share about that stuff? Like, were you able to be open in that area, or was that kind of off limits too?
I wasn't able to be open to it until my last two relationships, when I healed more and was able to really not feel the shame around it. But leading up to that, you know, like most of my relationships, they didn't know, and I was hiding it, and I would like eat and hide and do. But also what I found is a lot of my body and food stuff was driven by a deep sense of not belonging in the world and feeling alone in the world. But when I'm in relationship, that stuff doesn't feel as strong for me. I don't feel as alone in the world, right? So when I'm with a partner, I feel more supported. And so food isn't as much of a thing. And the funny thing is like, every time I get into a relationship, I just naturally drop weight. Like, it just comes off, because like, I wasn't in the crazy obsessiveness around, I'm alone in the world, like that, you know, that feeling that drove me to eat. So it was always a learning. And I think, you know, in my last relationship, I was very upfront, like, this is what I've struggled with. And I'm still kind of working through it, but I feel like I'm on the other side. But this has been something that's been true for me, you know, and I was judged. There was some judgment there, but like, I thought it was important to share, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And someone that can't hold that, like, that's not my person, right? If someone can't hold that for me, then that's not the person I'm meant to be with. You know?
They may not be able to officially 100% like understand it, but they have to be willing to understand it. And like you said, hold the space, or else how's this ever going to work?
Right.
Like, I feel like it's disrespecting a part of you, because essentially that's gotten you to where you are now. Yeah.
And the judgment came from like his own fears about how it would affect his lifestyle, right? It was a very kind of selfish, I mean, like, yeah, I get that. But like, if we talk about it, it's not going to affect your lifestyle, right? It was very much came from a selfish place, versus like, wow, I just want to support you and whatever that looks like. And, you know, and that's how I feel partnership, right? If you have a true partnership, that's what it's about, is like how we support one another through our stuff, because we all have stuff, you know? Yeah.
All right. So we're going to get into an area where I think this is not talked about enough, and you and I have talked about this, is an actual investing in yourself. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, but I think a lot of times when people think of that, they're like, okay, manicure, they automatically put it into self-care, and they think of luxurious, like manicure, pedicure, all that, or stocks and bonds, stuff like that. We don't mean that. We mean, what are you doing to invest in yourself to help you get out of your own way, to help you get out of this place where you feel stuck, whether or not it's with alcohol, with your relationships, with your body, with business struggles, with marital struggles, whatever it is. What are you doing to invest in yourself? And so I think it's really important, especially for people that work with other people, for them to see that we invest in ourselves a lot. It starts
100%.
small, and then it gets bigger. I was like floored when I heard some people that I admire, their level of investing in self. So I want to hear for you just what that looked like. I mean, you don't have to give amounts unless you want to, but
Yeah.
little bits, because I think it's mind blowing to people to see where you're at now and what it took.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think for me, like along the way, it was always about therapy, right? Like, oh, I need to be in therapy, right? That was a way I invested in myself, but it never really led me to where I wanted to go. It didn't really help me get to where I wanted to go. It was helpful for me to talk through things, but it wasn't until I invested in a coach and also invested in, I talked about the spiritual psychology program, which was a 2-year program. That was a $30,000 investment.
Yep.
And over
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Okay.
$30,000. And I looked at it as not only a self-healing, but also an education and an investment in my business. But when I went, it wasn't about my business at all. It was about my own healing. I was like, because they go so deep into relationship and healing the inner child and doing all of that work, I knew I was in a place where I needed that. That was like my next step for my life. And so I invested in that. And then that led me to invest probably 24,000 in a coach, a business coach. Then I invested in a coach.
I want you to hear those numbers because it's
24,000. Yeah. And listen, you guys, like I didn't have 24,000 laying around. Like I didn't have it, but I figured out how to make it work. Yep. And I also just worked with like, I know like a lot of people talk about manifesting, but I worked really with trusting myself and trusting that the universe brought this to me and would support me. Yep. Right. And so like when something's brought to us, like if you get introduced to a coach and you're like, oh my God, that person resonates with me. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can't afford it. That's bull. If you really want it, like you'll find a way to make it happen. Like the I can't afford it is just a fear objection. It's just you objecting out of fear of like, what if I fail? What if I can't, right? Like all the what ifs. And I had all of those, but I knew that the risk of me not investing was bigger than the risk of me investing.
Yes. Do you feel for a second before you move on with that? I just thought of this. Do you feel like you had to put boundaries, almost like a fence around your belief in yourself to make sure that you kept out other people's opinions on what you were doing?
Of course. I mean, I think we always do. And that's really also about choosing what we share, right?
Yep.
So for me, I've always had supportive people around me and, you know, and the people who aren't supportive, those are the ones I don't share with, right? Like we get to choose that. We get to have boundaries. But I think for me, I've been really, really mindful about who I surround myself with. And that's been a big part of my journey. And I've always felt so 100% supported in that, you know, from like roommates, when people are like, oh my God, nightmare roommates. I've never had a nightmare roommate ever, you know? And like, I just truly believe in my ability to like intuitively read people and connect with people in a way that a lot of people can't connect, you know? And so like, so this kind of investing in myself now, I still invest in myself. I have a money coach, I have a business coach, and I have a regular, like a personal coach. And it's something I build into my spending plan every month. Like it's like a car payment. Like I build it in hands down, like before I buy clothes, before I buy, you know, food is my number one value. So eating healthy is my number one value. So I will always invest in my health and well-being, always. Shopping on Amazon, all the bullshit that people spend money on, it doesn't happen for me because that's not important. What's important is my personal growth and my journey and being the best human that I can be in the world and being of service to my clients. And so I'm always in the adventure of what's my next level? What's the next place I'm going to? Like, how can I serve in a bigger way? How can I take care of myself in a bigger way? So, so I'm always building that into, it's like, it just is. Right? It's not something I even think about. It just is. It lives on my spending plan every month.
Well, it's so funny because I was going to ask you earlier, I was like, I want to know what her non-negotiables to be able to perform at a high level and coach at a high level. And I already knew food was one of them. But I think that is one of those things that people don't think about how much it affects every aspect of your life. It doesn't matter what type of food plan, whatever you believe, you know, you were saying you don't have to be vegan, you don't have to be a diet, you don't have to do any of that. but what do you do that you know works for your body that you can consistently do and keep up with so that you perform it? It doesn't become a thing anymore. So that you
Right.
can operate and you're not like, oh, I feel funky today because I ate this. And
Yeah.
when you invest the time to prep things and make sure you're set up ahead, that's like one of my things personally, that I prep stuff ahead so I'm good.
Yeah.
I never get bored with it. I'm not eating tilapia and asparagus either. I'm done with the bro diet.
Right. Right.
But that's another story. But
Yeah.
I do have things that are good that I know are fueling my body. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing. You are investing in yourself so you can keep operating at a higher level beyond the food with the money, the life coach, the business coach. Those
Yeah.
things help you elevate. And if you didn't invest in them, you would be still stuck in the same spot.
Right. Right. And you know what the craziest thing is to me? Like people will without like thought, you know, oh, I'm going to refinish my kitchen, or I'm going to put money into these like material things that to be like, you can have all those things and still be freaking miserable
Yep.
because you're not like, you know, or going on vacation twice a year. It's like vacations are great, but you still have to come home to yourself and live the life you're living. Right.
Or going on vacations with a spouse, hoping that saves their marriage, but they
right,
won't invest into
right.
something for the relationship. Okay, continue.
Yeah. So like there's these things that people invest in that are like not supporting them in the way that investing in getting like a coach or some kind of program that really helps you grow as an individual and live a more liberated life for the long haul, right?
That's the tagline: liberated life for the long haul. All the
instead of like the quick fix of the vacation that's over, like, oh, now I have a nice kitchen. Great. Who cares? Right? Like you have a nice kitchen. Okay. Yep. But what about your internal world? What's happening there? Like, what are you doing in the day to day? How are you taking care of yourself? How are you showing up? Like, how are you feeling?
Yep.
Right. And so like for me, none of that crap matters. Like I live in a nice home and I don't live, you know, but I live in a nice home, but it's the least of my priorities in terms of like, oh, I have to buy this or that or furniture or go, right? Like people spend so much money on stuff. And I'm like, you could be putting all that money toward your own growth and your own well-being, you know, and that's things that people don't think about, or they just feel like, oh, I don't have the money for that. But then they're like, you know, like wasting all this money on other things. And I know for people, especially going through COVID, like the Amazon shopping is like off the charts. Like people are, instead of, you know, doing all the numbing they're doing with like wine and food, they're doing that plus shopping, you know, online, right? Because we can't go to stores and do it. So it's like, oh, I'll just buy. And I keep seeing jokes about it all over the place, but I'm like, that's a problem, right? Like that's, you're wasting money. You're just like leaking finances, you know?
And I think it really just depends on like changing your money dial. Like what are the things that are non-negotiables for you? But then how do you know if you have an issue or a struggle or there's self-sabotage in an area, can you switch it so that when you start funneling that money into things that are actually going to get you places, that are actually going to get you out of your way, that are actually going to help you with that breakthrough? Because it does get really frustrating. And, you know, the people listening, you might feel frustrated right now. We're dealing with something no one's ever dealt with before. And that's okay. But I think one of the biggest things, just like they teach in any type of AA or, you know, NA or SA, anything, admitting that you have a problem, like stopping. And it doesn't mean that you have to figure out the how yet, but just saying, hey, I'm struggling with this. Like, how can I get better at this? So maybe it's starting with books on the topic. Maybe it's listening to podcasts like crazy. Maybe it's watching videos. There's so much free resources out there. So instead of tuning in to the newest Netflix show or watching everything political or all these things that are just going to make you more anxious because you're still stuck, invest in some free resources first. That's the best foundational thing. Like invest your time there, plug it into your calendar, and then start building your trust in yourself. And then you're going to start really investing and being like, oh, I got to do this type of thing. And it's going to lead you to the breakthrough.
Yeah. If it's not scary when you invest, it's not worth it, right? It has to feel scary. Like every single thing I've invested in has felt scary. And I've gotten the most growth out of it. The things that I invested in that were like, like, oh, I'll buy the $97 course or the $500 course.
Uh-oh, are you there?
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah. Anyway, like the small little things, I've never even done them. I've never finished them or even looked at them. But like the big things that I've invested in, especially when I do the one-to-one coaching, like that's a game changer for me because that person is there with me. They're on my team, they're guiding me and really supporting me. I'm also in a membership group with my business coach. It's hands down the most supportive group I've ever been in. I've been in a lot of different groups. This group is so high level and it's probably like similar to being in a mastermind. Like it's so high level and the amount of support that's happening in there is like so worth the investment and what I get and how I get to grow in my business and as an individual, you know?
And that, I think that that's the most important thing is whatever you're trying to do, you need to surround yourself with people that aren't going to look at you weird when you say something. Like I remember for me, one of my times where I was like, I've arrived. It was when I was in a health-based culinary school. I used to always take pictures of food and like the design of different things. And I remember everybody else the first day was doing the same thing. And I was like, my people, you're not going to make fun of me. I mean, I don't do that really anymore, but at the time I felt that love and that connection and they're not judging you based on being the weird one.
Yeah, you got to find your tribe, you know, you got to find the people that where you feel not even just fit in, but it's not about fitting in. It's about connecting, right? Yep. Like we don't just want to fit in. We want to connect. We want to have strong connections with people, right? That's really what I'm like, why do you want to fit in? It's not about fitting in. It's about being you and finding people who like fully accept you, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I want to hear any last little Melissa-isms or things, tips, tricks, tools. I know you do have some resources to offer people and ways to connect with them, but give them all the things.
God, that's a loaded question. You know, listen, here's the bottom line. I think that investing in ourselves is the most important thing we can do in our lifetime, whatever that means, you know, for each person individually. That's the way we get out of our own way, right? Is through stepping outside of our comfort zone. The place that we get, it's like it's comfortably uncomfortable or uncomfortably comfortable, right? Where we're like in this place of discomfort, but we're so used to it that we don't take the next step. And so if you're in that place, like take the next step, like find the podcast, find something that leads you to something else. Right? But I think like there's so much conflicting information out there. There's so many like, do this, don't do this, do that, don't do that. Find what like really resonates that like at your core that you trust, not like some next diet plan or meal plan, but like the thing that really resonates from a heart and soul level, not from the ego-based, I have to look a certain way, right? It's really about what resonates on a deep level. And I think like our emotional and mental well-being, yes, our physical well-being is so important. We all know that, we all get that, but like the emotional component is where people run. Like that's where people run, but that's where you get set free, right? So like, I would say the first step with that is just being able to like admit like, hey, I need help, right? I'm struggling and I can't do this on my own. Like that's hard for a lot of people to admit, you know? And then start to look for someone to support you in that, you know, whatever it may be. And, you know, I could give all the tools and tricks in the world, but like, that's not going to change anything if you're not getting that full support you need, you know what I mean? So find support. Like the day that my friend kicked me in the ass and was like, girlfriend, like you need help, right? That was the day my life changed, you know? So that's really all I can say about tools and tricks.
Someone said today when I was listening to this, when you like hire a coach or your business, whatever, that essentially, you know, you're signing up for some more anxiety and stress. Like when you do it, but you're going to have breakthroughs. Like, you know, you're going to have to up level yourself, but the breakthrough is on the other side. You just have to keep like showing up. And something else I thought about earlier and I forgot about, when you were talking about finding yoga and like becoming a yoga and teacher and stuff, I did the same thing, but I like had zero experience in any of that world. But I remember just being so terrible at yoga. I mean, terrible. I think you need to do something that you're just terrible at and experience the feelings that come up while you're doing it, and then watch the breakthroughs happen. Do that. If people want a breakthrough, do something you're terrible at and just watch yourself. Because used to in my head when I first started, I was like, okay, as soon as they flip upside down in this class, I'm running to the bathroom. That was my mentality. And then I got myself to the point where I stayed and I was uncomfortable, and then it wasn't that bad. And there were coaches and teachers, so I think just putting yourself in uncomfortable situations really can lead to a breakthrough too, and at least have areas where you're under a microscope of how you're in your own way.
Yeah. And I think we're all so scared of judgment, right? And if we can like who really gives a crap the older I get, I'm like, God, who really cares? Like that's such wasted energy, and yesterday I was in an interview circle and we were talking about like this idea of false positivity where people are just like, everything's great. Let's do affirmations and right. But it's like, that's not the answer, right? Mm-hmm. You need to get real and honest. And that's not always the easiest path, but it's the one that will set you free, And so like, I know for myself, like I got to go in. I can't look to anything outside of me. I got to go in and get the support I need. And like, that's where the real magic happens. It's not anything that's outside of me. So it's all about authenticity, vulnerability, the courage it takes to be in those, and like give up caring about what other people think. Cause it's just like, it's such a waste of energy,
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where can they find you? Because everybody's going to want to know where you hang out.
So first off, my Reclaim Your Wild Facebook group is so awesome, so much fun. I know you're in there. It's been such a fun experience to grow that group and like see the interactions. It's a place of real, true, authentic connection, authentic expression, just radical self-discovery, self-care, all of that. My website is Karma Chow. That's what I started out with in 2007, many years ago. And there's lots of great resources on there. I have a food freedom guide on there with a 7-part video series that just talks about my journey, the mistakes I made, and how I turned it around. And then I have recipes and blogs and all that stuff on there. So that's a great place too, to just get more familiar with me as a person.
Yay.
Thank you.
Well, guys, I hope you all loved her as much as I did. I love this. This was so much fun. It was
so I can't believe like 45 minutes went by. It's crazy.
I know. I was like, we're probably going to go 30 minutes. We'll just keep going.
I know. I love it.
Well, I appreciate you so much. Guys, check her out. Go follow her page. And Melissa, we'll stay in contact. I love foundational friendship. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.